Welcome to the Mind Tap Podcast, hosted by yours truly, Garret Fauth. Today we are interviewing American Ninja Warrior veteran Jamie Rahn. But before we get into that, this podcast has a sponsor. This episode is brought to you by 3 Peaks Performance, mental performance mastery training for athletes, coaches, and individuals who are seeking to gain a competitive advantage by maximizing their mental game while optimizing your physical, technical, and tactical training. To find out more about 3 Peaks Performance, visit their website, 3Peaks, P-E-A-K-S, performance.com, and follow them on Instagram, 3Peaks Performance, and enjoy the interview. I am here with 13-time American Ninja Warrior competitor, as well as competing in Sasuke Japan, Sasuke Vietnam, and Ninja Warrior Germany, Jamie Rahn, also known as Captain NBC. How are you today?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on. Can you explain what Ninja Warrior is to the people who might have never seen the show before?
Sure. So Ninja Warrior is essentially an obstacle course race, but at a way more complex and difficult level than you would find at your local mud run. So it's a high athletic level obstacle course race television program.
So what got you into Ninja Warrior?
So growing up, I always really liked Jackie Chan movies, and I was really impressed with his ability to move. And then I had started watching a show called MXC, which was a Japanese game show. I think it was Takeda's Castle, dubbed for English. Comedy. It was on like Spike TV. And it was really interesting kind of seeing people try and do these challenges. And then Sasuke came on TV in America, and my dad's like, hey, that show you like, there's a thing where people are doing it, but they're like actual athletes doing it. And I just fell in love when I saw it. The things back then seem so simple and basic now, but felt so impossible. Like seeing the stuff that Jackie Chan would do as a kid seemed so impossible. And then throughout the years, people would get better at it, and then the sport and the skill would just excel more and more. So once I found it on TV, I was hooked. That was back in season 2, I first found out about it.
So did you have a background in parkour or free running that helped you gain confidence in wanting to try Ninja Warrior?
I would say so. Not consciously. Consciously, I always played around, with parkour type movements, but never really knew what it was until I kind of came into college, which was soon after my first season on Ninja Warrior. Once I found out about it, I started training, but I always kind of played around in the woods as a kid and did a lot of stuff like that, but never knew that it was parkour or actually like trained parkour. I just kind of played around. But now, once I started, I think that was my big advantage was my parkour background for the later years after probably season 4 and 5.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a pre-competing routine? And then if so, how does that routine impact your performance?
I do. It was different earlier on. For the most of my career, a little background on how the show works. Previously, it would be outside in public, and they would build it outside. So if you got there early, you could kind of see them build things and try and figure out what it is. And I would try and mentally visualize as much as I could about each obstacle as I went, so that when I got to it, it didn't feel so new. Because you only get the one attempt. I wanted to kind of be as familiar as possible. So I would try to imagine how much effort it would take to do a jump, what that impact would feel like, what the texture would be, if it would give, if it would be soft, it would be rough, and try and do that as much as I could in my head and visualize the whole course, every obstacle. And then I would also go through different scenarios, be like, this is plan A, that doesn't work, and I realize it's something different, this is plan B, and I would go through that. It was it worked well, but it was very exhausting. Where the more recent years, I was more about enjoying it rather than stressing over getting through the obstacles. Because I eventually accepted the fact that you trained enough, it's going to work, rather than freak out the day of when you see something. So now my routine is try and figure out the obstacles, play it around in my head, but definitely not go into that much depth or that much worry about it. Remember that it's me running the race and not me relying on how other people do. And then right before I run, as close as I can, I'll start doing a little bit of run to get my cardio up, and then I'll put on some music and try and dance, because I realize the difference between anxiety and excitement are so close. And if you can just flip that lever over, then that nervousness is like, oh no, this is my one shot. If I mess up, I'm done. To, 10 degrees over, now you're in this realm of, hey, they spent millions of dollars for this playground for me to play on, and they want me to go on and have fun and do well, and people are cheering you on. So I focus on that and really get in that excited mode. But then I get too excited, so I have my wife or one of my really good friends give me a hug, and I'll do 3 breaths, one sort of positive affirmation like, this is going to be so much fun, or you've got this, or this is the day, and then one last hug, and then I'm out. So it's changed a lot, and I definitely have more fun now. It's much less stressful. I enjoy the course more. I'm not as what would be the right word? I'm not as prepared for variations in the course. However, I feel after doing it for 10 plus years, I've kind of gone through what all those would be. And so it's not going to be a big shock anymore if something changes.
So you mentioned visualization, and from what I've seen, some ninjas map out how they want to attack the course. So you said that earlier on it was more stressful. How, just in general, do you think mental visualization impacts the success?
I think it can help a lot as long as you don't let it overwhelm you, because you're setting a plan, and when you have a plan, you don't have to figure one out as you go. You just worry about executing it. You're not trying to solve the problem of the obstacle and complete it. You've already figured out ahead of time in your mind. Now you just have to act on that. A lot, like you said, a lot of athletes do that, and they'll be a lot more courageous with their plan of, hey, I'm going to go here, and I'm going to link this dismount. I'm going to get a big swing. And I think a lot of that planning is efficiency, where for me, a lot of it was planning for all the scenarios to make sure that I made it through, regardless of how much time it took. My theory always was, be strong enough to stay on the obstacle long enough to figure it out. But yeah, I think it really helps you break down so it's not this, mystery. It doesn't become that stressful frustration. And you'll definitely see people on the course, and you'll know that they just kind of end up in no man's land and can't figure out what to do. And that can really be a big problem.
Mm-hmm. So in Ninja Warrior, it's you versus the obstacle. How do you not let failing an obstacle affect you and your thinking?
So when you fail an obstacle, for some people, it's not the end of the world because they've did better than they did before, or, they made it to the next round. For me, my viewpoint on Ninja is it's full clear, or it doesn't really matter as that same level. So for me, to be satisfied completing the course in stage 4, to get to stage 4 and feel like I won Ninja Warrior, I would have to complete all the courses prior, do like the 6-button Jeff Britton run. And so if I fail an obstacle, it takes a little bit of pressure off of okay, it's not going to be a perfect run. I don't have to worry about it too much. I can have a little bit more fun with it. But the worst part when you fail an obstacle mentally is waiting around to know if you're moving on or not. Because a lot of it, even though it's you versus the obstacle, because only a certain amount of people get through, outside of Vegas, which is different this year, which you'll find out shortly, is if you complete the course, you move on. However, not many people beat a city finals course or a city qualifier, so they need X amount of people to move forward. So when you fail, you're in this weird realm of, I want to move on, but I don't want to move on at the expense of someone doing poorly. Like, you always want someone to do great and you're cheering them on, and eventually one of them is going to knock you off if you didn't do great or didn't do it quick enough. My what was that, season 4, I think, when season 4, Chris Wilczewski, one of the old G ninjas of the movement lab, I started training with him right when I came back from season 2, and I didn't get to compete in season 3, but then I competed again in season 4. And first time I hit the buzzer, hit qualifier, and then the city finals, he was the one that knocked me out at the end of the night of moving on to Vegas. But because he's my friend and we just want to see people beat the course, I was excited and cheering him on. So it's that weird realm of, you're out of the game, but you may still have a chance to play. But for me, it doesn't feel like the same game anymore, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So injuries are a part of any sport. How were you able to refocus whenever you have an injury?
Usually I focus on what is not injured, and that helps a lot, especially mentally. I think it's hard for people to deal with recovery, is they feel like they're going to lose a lot. First starting out, I broke my ankle, tore it, and got a high ankle sprain in one move, just standing up and twisting on a mat. So then for the next month where I couldn't put weight on my leg, I brought a walker to the gym and I started doing weighted pull-ups and dips every day. And now my upper body became my strength and my strong suit. So when an injury happens, if you can, focusing on what you can improve can be helpful. And if it's something like, I had a concussion once testing for Ninja vs. Ninja. So something like that, or a neck or a back injury, something where you can't really do something else because it's incorporated with every movement. You can think of it as a good way to balance out your inconsistencies. So let's say I'm right-handed. Maybe my coordination with my left is garbage. So as I'm rebuilding, I'll make sure to train both so that I'm equally prepared for whatever needs to come up. So when injuries happen, you're going to miss out on things, but if you can focus on, you're forced to improve something else. You're kind of forced to take that time, so you might as well take advantage of it.
So you mentioned before the camaraderie with the Ninja Warrior. You fail an obstacle, but you still are cheering on other people after it. How do the other ninjas push you to be better?
I think because I don't get to train as much as I used to, I'll kind of speak to when I got to train a lot with a lot of my ninja friends. I think what really helping push each other was really sharing tips and strategies for completing obstacles and never being satisfied with completing the obstacle, but wanting to go further and see what we are capable of. The sport's been around 10 years and there are still really unique obstacles coming out that, I would have thought 5 years ago we ran out of ideas of different obstacles, but people create them and then they're making these crazy movements and they show kind of what's possible, and they're willing to share that information and they want us all to kind of grow. And I think that's really exciting to really put in that effort when your friends are, hey, this thing we just learned, here's a brand new way to do it. It's way more efficient, or we can get way bigger or way further with these moves. And I really like to see how individually us sharing all that grows the skill level of everyone.
So Ninja Warrior obstacles come and go, but one thing that stays the same is the atmosphere. It has a huge TV audience as well as many people watching in person. How do you deal with the hype and pressure?
I think I definitely deal with it different now. I focus more on that excitement over anxiety. Originally, I was really nervous my first time out, super nervous. And then I started to get really excited about it. I really enjoyed it because one thing was, and I told this to everyone new who came out for Ninja, was no one is ever going to boo while you're up there. Everyone is always going to be cheering. Everyone wants to see you do well. So everyone's on your side. And I focus at not being like Ninja Warrior, the one and only show. I think of it as hanging at the gym with friends. Like we talked about, that training is, hey, we're going to help each other try and figure out all these obstacles. And they're cheering me on just like they would at the gym. So I put in that mindset, and that really helps. If you can get the thought out of your head of, this is my one shot, my one opportunity, which is really tough for first timers. I'm lucky I got multiple seasons. But if you do get to go back for more than 2 seasons, I think that can be really empowering of focusing on the crowd rather than the course. When we did the COVID, we didn't have anyone in the stands, no one on set, and that was really much harder to, have that atmosphere that you talked about at all. I mean, you go film it and they'll plug it in later, but it just feels like you wake up, you go for a run by yourself, and you come back. It didn't feel like, hey, I'm in this grand, event with all my friends. And I think that was a big change had to go through with COVID.
Mm-hmm. So stage 2 has been your nemesis, having never gotten past it. How do you not let that get to you when competing in the Vegas finals?
The way I think of it is, if I make it past stage 2, then I get to go to the more fun stuff. I definitely enjoy stage 3 and 4 style obstacles more. 2 is always really high in the air, so it kind of gets to me. And so I focus on, if I can get past it, then it feels like I already won because I've done better than I've ever done before. Stage 1, I think, is way more nerve-wracking because I want that chance to take down stage 2. When I get there, it's like, all right, cool, I get to take it down. Stage 2 bothers me on stage 1 because I don't want to fail without the opportunity to get past it. I think 3 times I failed stage 2. I hit wingnut twice, and then I think there was one other I failed. I think it might have been the TikTok thing. But yeah, I've made it close, but never made it through. Oh, the salmon ladder, first time in Vegas was the other time I failed it. Yeah, it's definitely been my nemesis. I can't think of a fun way to make it like a villain type thing for the show, but I mean, one day someone will think of something cool to put in there.
Yeah. So let me take you back to American Ninja Warrior Season 10. It's 2018. You're taking on Stage 1 at the Vegas Finals. You run up to the second obstacle. It's the propeller bar. You jump and lose a shoe.
Yeah.
Just how do you persevere through it and eventually running the rest of the course barefoot?
Yeah. It was, for me, it wasn't as difficult as I think people would expect. I train in I mainly train in barefoot shoes anyway, so they're very thin. And mentally, when it happened, I knew it came off, and in my head on the propeller, I said I just have to focus and get to the platform, deal with that later, focus on right now, because you get distracted. You're you're pretty much out. So I landed. I was like, hey, double dipper. I don't need a shoe for that. I can do this, and then I'll see what I can deal with later. Made it through the double dipper, and then the spider jump was up, and I was like, well, this is it. So in my head, I was like, well, either I'm going to fail, which is expected, or I'm going to make it, and that's going to be really awesome. And it's kind of that feeling in the gym where you're like, hey, I wonder if this is possible. I'm going to try this new thing. And when it worked, you're like, all right, we can do it more and more and build on it. So after I finished the dipper, I had the most fun on a course I have, because if I failed, it would have been expected, but everything that I got was just this brand new challenge, and it was cool to be able to beat it with that extra challenge. And physically, I like to train ahead of time with as much variety as possible. One, you don't always know what the course is coming up, but I like to play a game where you go through the quad steps, and you have to do it a different way every time. And we'll do it in a group, and we got to get through like 60 different ways. You can't repeat it. And so let's say I do it with my eyes closed. Maybe I'm in Vegas and dust blows in your eyes and you can't see. How are you going to make it through the course? Or you do it with one leg. Maybe you sprain your ankle and you have to make it through. Or we've done it before with socks. I've done the warp wall in socks before, which is way harder than with no shoes. So I've trained all these weird different ways. So when the shoe came off, it was actually something that I had trained without expecting it to happen. So that was to my benefit, but the mental aspect of it was a big surprise that I didn't expect, but ended up working out to my favor.
So being able to have all that variety in training helps you stay calm and be able to focus in those high, intense times.
Yeah, absolutely. You have that Rolodex to draw from when something comes up. You don't have to, figure out a new solution. You already have it ready to draw.
Because I remember in one of the All-Star specials, there's a clip of you just hanging on, I believe it's a stage 3 obstacle, and you're all twisted around funky, and you're able to stay calm and get through it.
Yeah, that was, I think they call it the birdhouse, those like peg things. Yeah, that was one of my favorite ones, and I just couldn't fall. If I could get through it and tag Lebrecq, we were good. And so I just played around with different positions to see what was good, because I was like, oh, better be strong enough to figure it out if I'm going to be up there.
Yeah, so in that same season, season 10, you make it to stage 2, and you face the obstacle that took you out a season prior, Wingnut Alley.
Yeah.
How do you focus on the current run and not let a previous failure on that obstacle distract you?
Yeah, so the first time I failed Wingnut Alley, I made the first move, and I had this like one-arm swing-off big save thing, and that got my adrenaline super pumped, and then I pumped myself out super quick, so I got really excited about it. So when I came back again next year, I was like, awesome, I've been practicing, I've got this, they're doing me a favor, giving me the same thing to beat. And I got there, and I got to the last throw, and in my head, I was like, I made this catch, I got it, we're good. And then I got all excited about it and relaxed that I took my mind out of it. And, after losing focus and thinking, okay, I finished the obstacle as opposed to being on the obstacle, that's what got me, is not being worried that I failed it before, but being too cocky once I went further than I did last year. I took it for granted once I got past that point.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned before about COVID and its impact. It impacted everyone, and it impacted the Ninja Warrior world as well. How were you able to deal with that impact, not just in your world, but within Ninja Warrior?
On the training side, I was running a gym, so it was a lot of scramble just to keep the gyms going, and we didn't know how long it was going to go for. So it was a lot of work and not a lot of training. Where I actually feel that was a perfect time for the teens to really step up their game and train every day because they didn't have school, which really brought the skill of the sport up. So for that one part, there was a little benefit in the progress of Ninja. But it did make things a lot more difficult. Like we said, there wasn't an audience for a long time. You couldn't have friends and family there. It became more of this thing you do rather than this awesome event and this, experience. But it was nice on the competitor side. They started changing things to save money and to cover themselves with exposure and stuff like that. That previously you would have to pay your way to get the qualifiers and finals, and then if you made it to Vegas, they would pay your way in hotel there. So with COVID, to get everyone out to one central location, they paid for flights, they paid for the hotel while you were there competing. So it took a lot of the financial burden off of competing and made it a lot easier to have friends and family come by, to take off work. So on the back end, it actually helped out. But the actual competing side of it, it was really tough because I couldn't get my pre-run hug. I was like, what if we both wear ponchos? And can I get a hug then? And I'm like, no, you got to be 6 feet away. You got to wear a mask at all times. You put your mask in a plastic baggie as you walked up on step, and then it'd be waiting for you at the end. And it was this weird thing where we couldn't connect like we did, and I feel like that was the heart that grew Ninja Warrior, was that competitor camaraderie. So I'm glad that started to come back again, but it was definitely a big dip during that time.
So this new season of American Ninja Warrior brought many changes, like in the semifinals, one-on-one racing, and then shooting, as well as in one central location, when before it was all over the country. How were you able to adapt, not just mentally, but physically as well, to these changes?
It wasn't too bad because it was still at night, which is what we're kind of used to. And during the COVID years, them flying us out to one central location as opposed to, pardon me, our individual ones. The only difference was that it went quicker and you would see more people at the hotel because we would do one night and they would go through all the qualifiers and they would start on the semifinals and work our way through that. So it wasn't too much of a change there. The biggest change was the head-to-head racing aspect of it. But I had done all of Ninja vs. Ninja and Team Ninja Warrior. So I was pretty comfortable with that aspect of it. You just gotta, go. You don't really have a chance to not go. If you hesitate, you're going to lose. The difference was we didn't know what skill level the head-to-head races were going to be set at until we got there. So Ninja vs. Ninja was very basic. It was a slider that you really only fell if you were rushing it. You had like a rope swing where it was a trapeze, but we kind of just swung on the chain. You had strides. You had a warp ball. Nothing was very technical or physically demanding. It was all how efficient can you be. And what was really good about the Team Ninja stuff was you got to race multiple times. So you had a seeding round and then an elimination, and with an easier course, you could feel out the obstacles and then make these big moves. For the city finals now, we realized it was a much more difficult course, which was good because then it wasn't this, I feel like the obstacles are more entertaining if they have a higher level of difficulty. As an athlete, it's more fun to do the simple ones if you're in a race because you just, push as hard as you can. But they were more difficult obstacles, and it wasn't necessarily about how fast you could go through it, but could you do better than the person you're racing? I don't know if it was intended to get everyone to finish the course because of the skill level they had it at. But I don't think a lot of it was a race to the buzzer. It was who would make the first mistake because they're trying to rush type of thing, or who would go out too hot and pump out, those types of things. So it was a different type of race that I think people are expecting, but it was definitely a fun one and a longer course. So it was, more like a city finals level of course, in terms of length. So I don't know how well that's going to edit to a race, but I don't know. Audience will have to tell me.
Yeah, and that first semifinal episode comes out tomorrow.
Oh, nice. Perfect timing.
So what advice would you give to people listening to this podcast?
I would say some of the best advice I've learned that I would pass on is to not hyper-focus on one particular aspect, but try and be prepared for what might get thrown at you. That way, whatever does come up your way, you've either dealt with it before, or it's easier for you to pivot and then deal with that because you're not stuck on this one road. That really, I think, helped me a lot as an athlete and just in general. And then something else that was really helpful, I started way back when Ryan Stratis did a workshop that I went to, I think like season 2-3, and he said that he hung from a cliffhanger 60 seconds in the morning, 60 seconds at night to build up his finger endurance, because none of us were big rock climbers. And so that daily commitment to doing something really makes a big impact. So whether it's, going for a run, I've done, 5Ks for a couple of years. I've done precision landings for a year. But picking something and doing it every day and really kind of making it an important thing to do really makes a lot of progress in that aspect that you're focusing on and in your mental fortitude as well to just get stuff done.
All right, that's all the questions I have for you, Jamie. I appreciate you being on.
Cool.
If there's anything you want to say or shout out, go ahead.
No. Enjoy the show and woody.
That's it for this interview. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview. Don't forget to check out our sponsor, 3 Peaks Performance, and follow the podcast on Instagram at mindtap_pod. Hope you guys enjoyed. Peace out, everyone.